Now we're going to watch the two news clips that we have from USA and from New Zealand.
Kia ora from New Zealand. So we've just celebrated 1 year since the general election, which brought in our coalition government. And one of the parties in that coalition government agreed to defund any sports bodies that allowed men to compete in women's sports and to legislate for single-sex facilities. And while neither of these have been implemented yet, the news of last week is that the National, which is the Conservatives like the Tories of Britain, have their Minister of Sport and Recreation has told Sports New Zealand they have to rewrite their guidelines with a view to fairness and safety, as well as inclusion and diversity. So that's a really good thing, because our guiding principles were heavily supportive of trans inclusion in women's sports. Well, basically that means men's inclusion in women's sports. And the Minister of Sport and Recreation has said that he doesn't think that the current guiding principles reflect community expectations, including sport at a community level. So that was really good news, and I'll put the link up for that. And then last weekend, Rowena Edge, she's one of the founders of Save Women's Sports Australasia. She spoke to the New Zealand First Conference, and I'll put a link up to her speech because it's really excellent and highlights not just the unfairness of men competing in women's sports, but also the indoctrination of our children in schools, which is still happening. So I'll put that up as well. The Speak Up for Women is organising our global participation in the global action against the new German self-ID law, and that protest will be the first in the world because of the time zone. So we're all trying to get people along to that and organising for that. We may be unfurling banners over the motorway, as well as the protest outside. So I think I may have reported last week about New Zealand prescribing up to 7 times more puberty blockers to young transgender patients compared with other similar countries. And they did a comparison with the Netherlands, Denmark, England and Wales, and we were miles higher than all those. So the researchers are saying that that we probably have easier access to assessment than those other countries. So making all sorts of excuses why we have why we're out of step with the rest of the world. I don't think we're out of step with Australia. I think we share that unlikely status. But what was noticeable in their article in our major newspaper was that they had one person who was advocating for the research itself, but 3 doctors and professors arguing that we're framing the data as alarming, and that overlooks, I'm quoting, the reality that more individuals are receiving the care they need to live authentically and improve their mental well-being. So we can't really win with our media. They go out of their way. So the other news from New Zealand is that the guy we call Tomato Boy, Eli Rubashkin, he's gone to the High Court to appeal his conviction for common assault, which is when he attacked Kelly J. Keane and Tanya Sturt, who was one of the organisers of the Albert Park event, Let Women Speak, in March of last year. He is arguing that he didn't throw the tomato juice over Kelly J, he poured it. But the main argument is that he hasn't been able to find work. He lost his job as a pharmacist, and because he's got a technical assault, he's not able to get work. It's interesting because he frames himself as intersex, but the media calls him transgender. they don't seem to know that they're not the same thing. And so then the next thing is that the Law Commission in New Zealand is looking at hate crime legislation, and that is despite the fact that this government has said they're not to look at hate speech. But what it turns out, the police have been collecting data, what they call hate crimes, since the mosque massacre in 2019, and that includes so-called hate crimes in relation to gender identity. So they also have incidents of non-criminal hate incidents, which the police are reporting as well. So we're quite interested as to why the police are recording incidents and reports that are not criminal activity. Finally, we had questioned whether the Health Committee really wanted to hear from us in an oral submission on surrogacy, but we've got a slot and it's this morning at 9 o'clock. So we'll be presenting for WDI as well as the Women's Rights Party and taking a hardline stance that we don't think that there should be a ban, particularly on international surrogacy.
WDI USA has recently published a number of interesting and thought-provoking blog posts that I'd like to direct your attention to. The first, titled 5 Questions, is an interview board member and Black Women Caucus facilitator Lorraine Nolan participated in for the Dutch book Gender Rebels, which, as Marianne Jason spoke of at Saturday's FQT, is an anthology of interviews and essays on a variety of topics. In the interview, Lorraine discusses the impacts of gender identity ideology specific to Black women, as well as her personal perspective on the adultification of Black girls. The next is a piece contributed by our Lesbian Caucus, which presents a progress report on the lesbian coming out group hosted weekly by the caucus. The online space allows women to discuss with each other as peers the challenges and questions being raised in their lives by lesbianism, and the report covers some of the topics that have been discussed in the group thus far. In our most recently published post, Why Abolish Gender, What It Would Look Like, and How to Do It, takes a critical look at the existing system of gendered culture, i.e. a system of male domination and female submission, and suggests a plan for abolishing that system. Each of the contributing authors is a member of either the Lesbian Caucus, Lauren Levy, the Desisted and Detransitioned Women's Caucus, Fern Lopez, or the Black Women's Caucus, Lorraine Nolan, and presents an analysis and strategy from all three perspectives. Next, a comprehensive analysis of insurance claims data by the advocacy nonprofit Do No Harm reveals that at least 14,000 U.S. minors underwent gender transition treatment, surgeries, or both between 2019 and 2023, with healthcare providers billing $120 million for those services. This 5-year tally is a conservative estimate, and the true figure is likely significantly higher. Do No Harm published the findings of their medical claims data analysis last week in a comprehensive website that allows users to investigate pediatric gender transition and surgery data by state and by individual institutions within each state. Apparently, the thing that never happens has happened thousands of times in America. On September 30th, several parents and a grandfather filed suit against the Bow School District in New Hampshire, claiming a violation of their First Amendment rights after school officials threatened them with ejection and arrest, then imposed no trespass orders against them for wearing pink XX wristbands as a form of silent protest during the Bow High School girls' soccer game on September 17th. The plaintiffs wore the wristbands in protest of the policy that allowed a male athlete to compete on the opposing girls' soccer team. The no trespass orders barred the parents from school grounds and events, one for a week and the other for the entire fall term. The lawsuit seeks to prevent the unconstitutional application of several school policies and asks the court to enjoin the school from using these policies to restrict non-disruptive expression of political or social views at extracurricular events. Requesting swift intervention, the lawsuit also seeks to allow the plaintiffs to attend their children's school events, including the ongoing soccer season, and silently express their views on protecting women's sports. Last week, in a preliminary ruling, a federal judge allowed that the Bow parent previously banned from school property for the rest of the season may now attend his daughter's games, provided he doesn't engage in any protest activity. Judge McAuliffe said the notion of whether parents should be allowed to passively protest at student sports events was legally nuanced and complex, and he wanted to hear more detailed arguments presented by both sides at the next hearing, likely to be held in late November. And finally, 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that a trial court judge in Georgia's Fulton County had struck down the state's 6 weeks abortion ban, aka the fetal heartbeat law, making the procedure legal up to 22 weeks of pregnancy. Unfortunately, the ruling was immediately challenged by the state's Republican Attorney General, who appealed directly to the Georgia Supreme Court as the case involved a challenge to the constitutionality of a state law. Last Monday, the court temporarily reinstated the state's 6-week ban, halting the trial court judge ruling that had overturned the law. The order took effect yesterday and will remain in place while the state's appeal is considered. However, the state Supreme Court left in place part of the trial court's ruling, blocking a separate provision of the law, giving state district attorneys broad access to the medical records of abortion patients in their respective counties. And that's all I have today. Thank you.